Dear brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of the Lord be on all of you. And can I begin by thanking the St. Gabriel's Church for the use of their splendid hall, which if you haven't been outside for a little while, you probably want to stay in here because it's nice and warm in here and increasingly bitterly cold outside. We were worried about holding a meeting this close to Christmas after the schools had broken up, and we worried about the attendance. But it's a great relief and pleasure for me to look on this packed church hall this evening. I don't know who the member of the Greater London Assembly for Harrow and Brent is. I've seen his name, but I've no idea what he is or what he does or what he's ever done. But what I'm certain of is that Akib Mahmood can do a better job than him. I'm absolutely certain of that. I'm certain that his voice, his youth, his energy, his intellect, his eloquence would be a terrific addition to the Greater London Assembly, which is a very important body about which nobody knows anything at all. I will give £20 to anyone in this room that can name 5 members of the Greater London Assembly. Any takers? I thought not. Because this is a parliament, like the Scottish Parliament, like the Welsh Parliament. If you ask anyone in Scotland or in Wales to name 5 members of the Scottish Parliament or the Welsh Assembly, you'd be snowed under, you'd be broke if you were giving out £20 notes in exchange for that. But nobody at any meeting, any gathering that I have made that challenge to is able to name 5, 4, 3, even 2 members of the Greater London Assembly, and we have to change that. London is being short-changed in the Greater London Assembly, but the members of it are not short-changed at all. They earn the same salary as a member of Parliament. In Westminster, they have the same expenses. They have the same staffing levels, yet no one knows any of them or what any of them does. And the reason for that is they don't do anything at all. Their primary purpose is to hold the directly elected mayor to account. But Boris Johnson treats them with absolute contempt, and they accept it because deep inside they know that that's all that they deserve. Boris Johnson controls a budget of £18 billion a year, and he's been in for 8 years. That means around £150 billion has been spent by Boris Johnson. And where is it? You see any results? You see any evidence of it?
Yes, he has gone to Israel.
Sorry?
Yes, he has gone to Israel.
Well, he's big on Israel, and I'll come back to that point. In fact, let me briefly segue into a few words on the international situation before returning to London and the role of the mayor. I learned yesterday that David Cameron is about to send a huge British ground force into Libya. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? And when I asked the person who told me, who's in a position to know, but will the Parliament vote for that? They told me the Parliament doesn't need to vote for it. It was tucked away in the small print of the motion which they passed 2 weeks ago to begin bombing Syria. And in that small print, it says that British forces will tackle ISIS wherever the government thinks they need to be tackled. And they're going to use that small print to justify yet another British invasion of yet another Muslim country. What could go wrong? 456 British soldiers were killed and thousands were disabled in the war in Afghanistan, which it is reported today has turned into a complete rout, a complete shambles. Helmand province, where hundreds of British soldiers gave their life's blood, uncountable numbers gave their limbs, their futures, fighting in Helmand province, is about to fall to the Taliban, from whom the British forces took it. The puppet regime in Kabul will shortly, remember you heard it here, be clambering onto helicopters to escape to the countries that put them in power. The Afghan war has been a complete bloody disaster, which has cost us hundreds of billions of pounds. Imagine, never mind the banks, we'll come to them. Hundreds of billions, and the blood of thousands of our servicemen, either killed or wounded, has been expended for absolutely nothing. And our Prime Minister, this one, the last one, and the one before that, who told us solemnly at the dispatch box every week the names and the ranks of the fallen, and promised that they would never forget them, I promise you, have long ago forgotten them. Indeed, I put this to the test once. I asked the Prime Minister privately, just after he had announced the names of 5 British soldiers who had been killed the previous week in Afghanistan. He'd just intoned their names and told us that he would never forget them. I asked him, half an hour later, do you remember the name of one of those soldiers you have just said you will never forget? And he couldn't name one of them. I had a very stricken mother and father at a meeting I addressed once near Manchester, who were ashen-faced, trembling, as they told us in the meeting, in the Q&A, that their 19-year-old son had just been buried, having been killed in Afghanistan. And the father told me that his son had been buried with a picture of Her Majesty the Queen in his top pocket. And I told him, I'm sorry to break this news to you. The Queen is not carrying a picture of your son in her top pocket. These people are sending our sons, somebody else's sons of course, never their own sons, to die for nothing. And we're about to do it all again in Libya. And it won't go any better in Libya than it went in Afghanistan, than it went in Iraq. It won't go any better. And who in this country told them more than me what a disaster this would all turn out to be? Jack Straw, currently in the robing room, waiting for his red ermine coat. The police don't get to him first. Announced in February of 2002, that the British soldiers would be home by Christmas. And I told him, the British soldiers will not be home 10 Christmases hence. And he laughed. Oh, how he laughed. He invited the whole house to laugh. But more than 10 Christmases hence, the war is still raging, and the people that we supposedly went there to defeat are on the verge of victory. Now, The person who told me about the Libya invasion, I asked them, is Labour going to support this? And they told me, well, Corbyn will oppose it, but Hilary Benn will support it. And Maria Eagle, the shadow defense spokesperson, will support it. And we'll have again the grotesque spectacle of Jeremy Corbyn sitting here, Hilary Benn sitting there, and Maria Eagle sitting there, with the two of them cheering for the invasion of Libya, and poor Jeremy sat in the middle, deserted again by his closest spokespeople. Now, I have sat in Parliament for almost 30 years, usually right next to Jeremy Corbyn. He's my friend. He's my comrade. And for nearly 40 years, I've marched alongside him against war, against cuts, for all the good causes. But I tell you this, until he rids himself of these Trojan horses sitting alongside him, he will forever be prey to ambush from either side. And the Tories will cheer as they cheered Hilary Benn as he spoke in favour of Britain launching attacks on Syria. The Tories will cheer, and real Labour people will weep. And it's for those real Labour people that I'm standing in this election, because I'm opposed by one of that group, one of the Hilary Benn, Maria Eagle group. Those who support Jeremy Corbyn as the rope supports the hanging man. And at the end, when the rope supports the hanging man, the hanged man is dead. And that's what these people are up to. And I, for one, will not be a party to it. So anybody who thinks that by voting for Sadiq Khan, I'm not going to waste much air on Zach Goldsmith, the multi-billionaire, blonde, old Etonian, Bullingdon Club champion. We've already had enough of those, haven't we? 8 years of Boris Johnson. Why would you volunteer for another 4 years? Zach Goldsmith earns £450,000 a month in interest on the trust fund that his father left him. It's nice work if you can get it. I'm not sure you'd call it work. But what can he possibly know about the lives of people in Brent? What could he possibly know about struggling to meet a rent, about struggling to meet a mortgage, about having to go for an interview for a job, about sending off dozens, hundreds of applications for a job? How could he possibly know anything about living life on minimum wages or just over them? How could he possibly know about the costs of getting on the tube, of getting on the bus? He can't possibly know about any of these things, and he doesn't know. He's a decent enough person. But if you want another trust fund, multi-millionaire, blonde Tory mayor, well, you've got one on the ballot paper. I'm not going to waste any more time on him. But my main opponent, and the opponent in front of whom, if I come in the first ballot, I'll be elected as the mayor, because most of those who will vote for Labour will put me as their second preference. What else are they going to do? You can't vote for Zach Goldsmith as their second preference, surely. His name is Sadiq Khan. You won't know him. Nobody knows him. He's a cipher. He's a desiccated, calculating machine who doesn't have beliefs and seek to persuade you of them. He wants to know what are your beliefs, and he'll pretend that he supports them too. The problem with that is, tomorrow night, in a very different area with a very different crowd, the same thing will happen. And as Malcolm X famously said, if you don't stand for anything, you'll fall for everything. And that's exactly the man that I am up against. He is Mr. Flip-Flop. Flip-Flop was invented for him. He nominated Jeremy Corbyn, and then he voted against him. He nominated Jeremy Corbyn, voted against him, then announced that he would not take a place in Corbyn's shadow cabinet. When he was selected as the Labour candidate, the first thing that he did was give 2 interviews to those well-known friends of Labour, the Jewish Chronicle and the Mail on Sunday. And in those interviews, he accused Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell of encouraging anti-Semitism, of encouraging terrorism. Why? Because they stood up for the Palestinian people under attack in Gaza. Well, I stood up for them too, and I'm proud of Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell for standing up for them too. The Palestinian people are not the terrorists, they're the victims of terrorism. And it's incumbent on everybody to stand up with the victims of terrorism and not with the terrorists themselves. Sadiq Khan told the Jewish Chronicle that if elected, he will lead a trade delegation to Tel Aviv to boost trading relations between Britain and Israel. I will not. If I'm the mayor, I will not. When Mr. Modi, the murderer, Prime Minister of India, came here a few weeks ago, me and Akib and my wife and my friends here, we were stood outside in the cold at Downing Street and at Wembley, protesting against the presence of Modi in London, and Sadiq Khan was inside Downing Street and inside Wembley, welcoming Modi. If Modi comes back to London, he will not be received by me. The doors of City Hall will be closed in his face. Whatever that costs me in votes, I say it because I believe it. And I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. And if you know anything about me, you know that that at least is true. Even if you don't agree with me, you know that I believe in what I'm saying and that I'll do what I say. I'm afraid you will not be able to say that about Sadiq Khan. He was in favor as a minister of further development at Heathrow. As soon as he became a candidate for mayor, he was equally vehemently against further development at Heathrow. Flip, flop, according to whomsoever he is talking. And that way lies disaster. Because if no one can believe what you say, then all you are doing is deepening the sense of disillusionment and even rage that Akib talked about in his address. There are too many liars in politics already, too many liars in Parliament already, too many fools at City Hall already. It's time for a change, and we represent that change. With your support, we can do it. Now let me turn to that £18 billion a year that the mayor has to spend. That's more than the budget of some small countries, by the way. And yet it's being spent year after year after year. None of us know anything about it. None of us know what it's being spent on, whether we're getting value for money, or even, frankly, looking around, where it could possibly have gone. Well, let me deal with the three main areas. Though there are more, there are three main areas and what we intend to do. I'm sorry to say that the first thing I have to talk about is the police. I'm not against the police. I've often had to use them. When I was attacked by a supporter of Israel in the street, not very far from here, not 10 minutes drive from here, I had to depend on the police, and they performed magnificently. And I've been in London for almost 35 years, and almost every interaction I've had with the Metropolitan Police has been a positive one. But then I'm white with blue eyes, and for most of the time I've been in London, I've been a prominent person. My experiences with the Metropolitan Police are not the same as the majority of people in the minority communities in London. And don't forget, never forget, that 53% of London now are minorities. The minorities are the majority. And that's going to grow and grow. It's not going to change. But we have a police force that doesn't look like London, which isn't led by people who look like London. And many parts of London regard the police as an occupying army rather than a consensual policing organization working for them. And there are many reasons for that. And they keep on coming. We'll be very lucky if there is no backlash to what happened in North London just a couple of weeks ago, less than 2 weeks ago, where yet again a young black man was shot dead by the police. I can't say too much. The cameras are rolling and the police officer is under arrest. He was first suspended and then put under arrest. I can't say much more, though I know much more about what happened. But I can say this. Once again, a young black man was shot dead, slain, and then slandered. The spin immediately spun around the entire media that the young man had come out of the car firing and had to be shot dead. But there was no gun. He didn't come out firing because there was no gun. These are the tales that we hear almost every time. We heard it in the Mark Duggan case in Tottenham that led to widespread riots throughout London and other cities. And this is just not acceptable. We had it in the case of John Charles de Menezes, the Brazilian electrician who got 5 bullets in his brain from a police officer lying on top of him who had completely immobilized him. And instead of handcuffing him, he fired 5 bullets into his head. Why? Because he looked like a Muslim who might be intent on terrorism. But he wasn't a Muslim. He wasn't an Asian. He had nothing to do with terrorism. But he was shot dead and then slandered. You remember they told us that he jumped the barrier, that he'd been running down the stairs, that he failed to stop, that all the police's efforts to apprehend him failed. None of those things were true. And the CCTV film miraculously went missing until it was impossible any longer to conceal the truth. The police had made yet another gigantic blunder. Now, I'm here to tell you, if I had been in that car and I had got out of that car, they wouldn't have shot me dead. Well, maybe in my case they would. But people who look like me would not have been shot down dead. But he was shot down dead. And that's because he was young and black. That's the truth of it. And this is recognized by the leadership of the Metropolitan Police, by the commissioner himself, and right back to the Macpherson inquiry after the cruel murder that took place, it's now almost 20 years ago. The Lawrence case was such a landmark that the police had to concede that the force was riddled with institutionalized racism. And I'm bound to tell you, it's not any better now. The number of officers from minority communities began to rise after the reforms in the Macpherson inquiry, but it has begun to fall again. The number of ethnic minority police officers is not going up, it's going down. And that helps to buttress the feeling in minority communities that the police are not for them, that the police are policing them, not for them. And the stop and search statistics are, of course, staggering. You are 10, 20, 26 times more likely to be stopped and searched in London if you look like him than if you look like me. Now, I'll be a friend to the police. I'll support them on wages. I'll support them on equipment. I'll support them on fighting terrorism. I'll help them fight terrorism. I know where the terrorism's coming from. I know what it's about. I'm in the best position of all the candidates to understand the terrorist threat that we face. But I will not tolerate racist policing. I will not tolerate racist police officers. And I'll want to know every Monday morning from the Commissioner what progress is being made on policing London blind to the colour of the face of the person or blind to the colour of their shirt collar. What do I mean by that? Well, if you pick somebody's pocket in Liverpool Street Station, you'll be behind bars very quickly. But if you're a banker who picks the bank's pocket of 10, 15, 20 million pounds, your chances of being arrested, convicted, and imprisoned are virtually zero. Only one person has gone to prison for the crash and the reckless negligence and criminality that caused it. And the appeal court today cut his prison sentence to 11 years for rigging the LIBOR rate. But he was just a patsy in any case. We're asked to believe that an official of his rank was deciding of his own volition to boost the bank's profits by rigging the foreign currency exchange rates, but that nobody higher up in the bank knew anything about it, Gov. We didn't know, my lord, that our underlings were doing this. We just pocketed the money. So I'm being signaled by my boss at the back of the room that I'm going on too long. So let me quickly address two additional points. The police is one thing. Transport is the other thing. TfL is supposed to stand for Transport for London, though most people think these initials mean something else. They are ruining transport in London. They are filling our streets with tens, scores of thousands of new private hire Uber drivers. Almost 100,000 new so-called taxi drivers have been put onto the streets. We don't know anything about their car. We don't know if they're insured. We don't know if they're crooks, and some of them obviously are. We don't know what will happen if you're in an accident in their car, whether you'll be covered, whether they're covered. And the streets are absolutely log-jammed, pumping such pollution into our air
that more than 9,000 people last year died directly as a result of breathing the polluted air that this congestion is producing. So I'm on record, and I'll say it again. If I'm the mayor, I'll run Uber out of town. I'll support the black cab trade and the legitimate private hire cab drivers, and I'll work for a rational solution to the critical problem of congestion in London, which is economically and in health terms ruinous. I'm going to ban heavy vehicles and trucks from central London between dawn and dusk, because these heavy vehicles are killing cyclists almost every week. They're certainly killing or maiming cyclists every week. And when you get stuck behind one, and we were today in Harlesden, stuck behind 3, stuck behind 2 and 1 coming towards us, and they couldn't get past each other. So huge were they. One of them was a motor car transporter carrying dozens of other cars. This cannot go on. We have the most expensive tube fares in the world, the most expensive bus fares in the world. We have the highest rents in the rented housing sector in the world. We have the highest house prices in the world. Yet our wages are stagnant or in real terms falling. That's the truth. Working class people are being driven out of London by house prices and house rents that simply cannot be afforded. Now, the mayor has a lot of powers in all of these regards. I think you know by this stage in what I'm saying, or you already know if you watch me on YouTube or listen to me on TalkSport or on LBC, if you've followed my work over decades, you know that I'm a pretty tough guy. And the bosses of Transport for London and the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police are really going to hate me. The property speculators are really going to hate me. They already hate me. That's why they're pouring money into the election campaigns of my rivals. Well, no property developer is funding my campaign. Why would they? Because life's going to be hell for them if I become the mayor. The Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police is probably praying daily that I don't become the mayor, because life's going to get a lot more difficult for him if I become the mayor. And the chiefs of TfL also. So, I've now defied my boss for long enough and spoken for long enough. Thanks for coming, and I'm ready to take any questions. Thank you.